Thank you, and welcome to another video from Ellensburg Amplifier Repair and Service. Today we have a American bass amplifier. Model number is the PH 4000.1 MD V2. That's quite the long name for an amplifier. This is going to be what I call the typical standard Type 4 board. And I figured we'd shoot a video on the repair of this today. So, some initial testing shows that I don't have any shorts in the power supply or the output section of this amplifier. But yet it will not power up. Nothing will power up. I will get the remote power making its way, but that's as far as it goes. So I slid this board out of the heat sink, and what I found was quite interesting. And if we look right over here, we can see the failure of this board. And I don't think I'm going to call this a failure. This is an open trace. This is an open 12-volt side of the power terminal. And it's blown wide open. There's nothing left connecting this board. So right off the bat, that tells me that since I have no shorted outputs, I do believe, let me double check to make sure I don't have any shorted output transistors here. 5.3, 5.3, 5.3. Oops, backwards. Let's see here, 5.3. and 5.3. So I don't have any shorted output transistors. I don't have any shorted power supply transistors. The power supply transistors do show 10K, which is going to be your 10K pull down resistors. So that is exactly what I'm looking for. And drain to source. Drain to source, just to double check, is charging the capacitors. So good sign. That's a good sign. That's what we're looking for. Drain to source on the other side. There's two transformers here. Drain to source is charging the capacitors. So there's no shorts around this board. So the number one reason, typical reason why you get blown traces like this is it got hooked up backwards. There is no reverse polarity protection diode on this board at all, anywhere, which if there was one, it would have probably saved the trace. So there is no reverse polarity diode, so when it got hooked up backwards, these transistors can carry enough current between the drain and source to where the trace itself just heats up and fails. So let's see, what transistors are they using in the power supply? Let's see what kind of current rating these can handle. So these are the I can barely read that. Let me get a flashlight here to so these use the 65 NF06s. I mean, that's not too hefty, right? The P65 NF06. So 65 NO6s in the power supply. Which, yes, if you hook it up backwards, you're just going to burn your trace up. So this is going to be pretty much really a straightforward, simple trace repair. me clear some stuff here real quick. And we'll, just to show you a general overview of what I do and how I do this, is I keep sheets of copper up on the bench here that I use to repair traces. And this is the shielding off of transformers. It's I don't want to say a free source of copper. The transformer obviously isn't free, but it does, you know, save time to have and buy copper strips. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a knife here, and I am going to scrape away the top layer of this trace. I want to get rid of all the carbonized or burnt, discolored trace. And just to let you know, this trace is relatively thin, which is probably the reason why it gave up before the transistors did. So I'm just going to clean up the top of this copper here. I'm going to fire up my Hacko desoldering gun here, because I'm going to put some flux down on this, and I'm going to flow some solder all around this to see what part of the trace will take solder and what part won't take solder. Because as copper heats up, it does deform the copper. It really messes with the property of the copper. So I'm going to take some of my Amtech flux here, and I'm just going to go around the copper area that I plan on putting solder on, and see what part of this trace will take solder. It's looking pretty good so far. This will show me where I have to lay down the new copper trace. And not bad at all, not bad at all. There's some areas that aren't taking any solder. Because again, sometimes once this stuff heats up, it just will not take solder. I could probably scrape down to the copper some more to get it to accept some solder, but nah, I won't worry about that. So I'm going to take my copper strips and cut the copper strips, and then I'm going to also take my knife here, and I'm going to scrape the top of this copper. Sometimes on these transformers, you gotta pay attention. They'll get some lacquer on the shielding. So what I'm looking for is seeing if there's any lacquer coming up off this copper, and there's some lacquer on this strip here. So I just want to get down to the bare copper on this. We want the solder to stick to the copper, and with this lacquer on there, the copper, the solder will not stick to the copper. Just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these copper strips and I'm going to place them onto the area that I want to put back together. Making sure that I don't short out anything in the process. There are some, I think those are capacitors there, filtering capacitors. So I'll just use my scissors and trim the copper as needed. To match the trace that I'm soldering to. So let's see if I can get you down in here a little closer with, of course, this nasty glare. But you can see right here where I just took the copper and kind of laid it in place. So you have a via here for a capacitor and you have a via here for a capacitor. So you just want to make sure you don't short out anything in the process. Let me back it back up. Sorry about the glare of the lights. I think one day I'm going to get some diffusing, I think it's called diffusing filters, that will go up on the up over the lights there for you guys. And then what I'm going to do again is I'm just going to lay the solder across the new copper sheet that I prepared. And this is where it takes quite a bit of solder to get things to flow right back together. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of reflow the terminal. And this is why I use my Hakko desoldering iron. It just has a little bit more heat, of course, than your soldering iron, your standard soldering iron. And these terminals here can really suck up a bunch of heat. So we just want that little bit of extra heat to help things flow together. And I just follow the edge of the copper sheet, and that solder will kind of wick right underneath with the flux that's in place. For anyone that's done any soldering for pipe work, you'll know it'll just kind of suck it right up. And then I'm just going to level out the areas here, make it somewhat presentable. And then I'm going to take another copper sheet and do the other side here. So I'm just going to kind of gauge what I need, cut it down to size. And put it in place. And you can see where I'm just rebuilding this trace right around the side here that got burnt, right off the terminal block. And you'll see what we'll do once we get this copper in place. We will go around and kind of reflow all the areas of this trace here. And this is how I go about repairing reverse polarity damage. And then I just reflow the original trace. It'll just add a little bit more depth to it to help carry a little bit more current. But again, you got to remember there's no reverse polarity protection diode on this, so you reinforce it too much and you're just going to end up burning up the power supply. I'm going to make it just a little bit more robust than it was last time, just so we can carry a little bit more current. And then I'll let the owner know that this was had a reverse polarity issue, and that's why it failed, just to help remind people to watch their polarity when they go to hook this back up. And as you see, I'm doing the same thing for the ground side, because the trace on these are a little thin. And that is that. Not the prettiest thing in the world on camera because of the glares that the solder is making. I mean, this is nothing like going over a flow table. But I do guarantee that this will work again. And of course, all my work is guaranteed too, just let you guys know. For anyone that's looking to reach out to me for amplifier repair, I do have warranties on my work. Anything I do, any work that I perform, I do warranty. Get a hold of me if you have any questions on that. But again, I do warranty all my work. So we're just going to clean this up with some isopropyl alcohol here. I'm going to get rid of some of this flux. If there's two things that I don't like flux, and I don't like thermal paste. Flux is a sticky, nasty mess, and thermal paste is just a nasty mess, period. So the less I have to deal with it, the better off I am. Or the happier, I'm not to say better off, the happier I am. So I'm just going to clean it up here with my trusty Q-tips. So this is not a sticky mess. And what we'll do is we'll give it some power and see if anything blows up on me. Hopefully it doesn't, fingers crossed. And again, for all you viewers that are probably new to my channel, I really use resistance mode for pretty much all my testing. So the meter tells me pretty much everything I need to know. So I have it set on resistance. Sorry, I don't have it up on the screen right now for you guys. But the value, the resistance value just absolutely tells me the whole story of this. 10K, so my positive red lead of the meter is on the gate, black's on the source. So 10K, which is going to show you your 10K pull down resistors. And then drain source. I always check drain source, make sure I don't have any shorts across the drain and source. If you do this, you will prevent 95% of all your whoops when you turn it on. When something pops or your power supply goes in overcurrent because you have solder bridges or something is not quite right with the amplifier. So I always check the resistance before I power any amplifier up. So gate source on the output is 5.2K, 5.3K, gate source, 5.2, 5.3K, and 5.3K. Again, my black lead is on the gate and red lead is on the source. And then I also check and make sure I don't have a short across drain and source. And these are probably going to be the 640 ends, which is real common on the Type 4 boards. So it's charging the capacitor. That's good. If there was a short, it would not be charging the capacitor. And charging the capacitor. That's good. Okay, so there's no shorts that I can see in the power supply section or the output section. And that's the board, Type 4 board for you guys. Again, a real common design. Let me go back to the review here, raise this up, and kind of go over this board just a little bit here for you guys. So, on these Type 4 boards, it's typical, you'll see 3205s typically on the power supply section here. You're going to have some surface mount transistors, typical again for a Type 4, and probably typical and being driven by the TL494. Common setup. This is just a really small version of the bigger Type 4 boards like the Audio Pipe 3K and even some of the Audio Pipe mid-range amps, the 1500s or whatever wattage they're at. Originally, I've seen a lot of these Type 4s with the Audio Pipe boards. But this is a shrunk down version of a Type 4 board. So then you're going to have yourself a 74HCO2 on the output card with a TL072 and a, what is that, hold on. On these cards that have a single 74HCO2, 74HC 86 is what this one says. But typically the 74HCs, you'll find 2 of those on a card, but this is the smaller version. So that's the LM. I'm not so sure. That's so small, I can't quite see it. So let me get my helping eyes out here and see what these are. So they're using an LM6172 and an LM292. Okay, so the 292, what's that? That's your comparator. See, thermal paste. Hold on, I got to get this thermal paste off of me. Yeah, thermal paste. I can't stand this stuff. So I think let's go ahead and get some power to this thing and see what it does. So I've got my 10 amp, of course. It is a current limited supply. It'll let me know when there's any issues. Hopefully the drive's okay. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these Type 4s, but when you have a faulty drive, sometimes these outputs can kind of pop like a firecracker. What are these? Are these 640Ns? Yep, 640s. You'll find the 640Ns on a lot of these Type 4 amplifiers, so that use the TO220 size transistors. So I'm just going to touch the remote. There, now this thing is back to life. So let's see, can we get this into view with the lights? All right. I'm just going to check the rail voltage real quick here to see if we're building anything. There it is. So we have a blue light. And with that blue light, I did not get a transistor popping. Nice. So we do have the blue light. And then from here, what I'll do is I will check with the thermal camera. I'll check with the thermal camera here to make sure I don't have anything that's heating up excessively or abnormally. The not number one, I should say one of the most common failures of amplifiers is a failure overheating. The output section is stone cold. All right. So I have no doubt that this is going to be functioning the way I would expect it to. I'm just going to fire it up. Let's see here. Let's go see if I got signal. I sure do. All right. So what I do, so the side, if you're looking at the board facing the drive card, the right-hand side of this board, the board part closest to you, is the transistors that will ride on the negative rail. So the gates on these are referenced to the negative rail. So you have to set your voltage up on your scope to at least reflect the current voltage of the rails, which it would help if I were to get you guys an image of the scope. So let's go ahead and find the scope here. It's a USB setup. So I'm going to search, select the Rigol DS1000Z series, and start capturing. And then the scope, well, I'll get the scope going here for you guys. All right, now let's get this scope going. Oh, and just to let you guys know, it's happened now. This is probably the third time this has happened. The Rigol 1054Z scope here. Like I said, this is the third time it's done this. I'll start it, and it'll completely reset itself. It'll go to a Chinese language. All my settings are gone. There's a little, I think there might be a glitch in the firmware, but it happens probably once every 6 months. Like I said, this is the third time it's happened, so probably once every 10 months. So I lose all my settings. So I need to get you guys set up with the right settings here. So let me manage my way through this menu real quick here. Pulse, edges, TV max, rate, voltage, peak to peak. Do we want voltage peak to peak? Yes. I do believe that's what I'm looking for. So let me get this amplifier fired up here and see if I can show you guys what I'm looking at. All right, so let me bring my trigger down here. So this is the negative rail drive. Again, this is referenced to the negative rail coming through a 12 volt regulator. Is that a 12 volt or a 5 volt regulator? Sorry guys, I don't memorize things. It's a 78ML5, so that's a 5 volt regulator. So you'll see that rides the negative rail at 122 kilohertz. So let's go ahead and capture the rail-to-rail drive of this. And there it is up on the screen for you guys. So the rail-to-rail is at 123 kilohertz, and we're peak-to-peak is 150 volts, which is going to be your rail-to-rail voltage. And that's typical of a Type 4 board for you. So that there is the just a quick rundown and repair of a small American base Type 4 board for you. Just a reverse polarity problem that took out the positive trace underneath, repaired the trace, and everything else miraculously survived that reverse polarity. Sometimes on these boards, when you hook it up backwards and there's not a reverse polarity protection diode, you will damage a significant amount of circuitry in the remote circuit, anything that's connected to positive and ground, transistor wise, could potentially have failed. So I'll show you real quick here what I'm talking about. This amplifier was hooked up reverse polarity. What is this? This is a hold on, let me tell you what this is. Oh, it's the so it's the Def Bonds Apocalypse. Def Bonds 201.4. Yeah, so it's the Def Bonds 201.4 is what this board is. And it was hooked up backwards. And it damaged a substantial amount of circuitry in the drive section here. It took out a voltage regulator here, which I had a heck of a time finding a replacement for this voltage regulator. It's on the way now. The regulator I got was the wrong package size, so I think it's a package and pinout that's not very common, but I got a new one coming. So that reverse polarity can do a lot of damage, but luckily on this board it survived. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to leave them down below in the comments. Like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. If you want to help support this channel, it's fantastic. Every time I get some new people in, some new faces are always good to see. And I'm always more than happy to answer any questions you guys may have. So I will see you on the next one. Again, please guys, stay safe on these amplifiers. So they can, even on the smaller boards here, like you saw, you got a 70 volt potential on each side of this thing. So keep your fingers safe. Could give you a bad day. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks guys.